everyone, and thank you for joining us as we celebrate 150 years of the Modern Theosophical Movement. Monday, November 17th, marks the anniversary of the formation of the Theosophical Society. In 1875, a new impulse was given by humanity's great teachers to the wisdom religion. While the forms are many, the eternal cause is one. The motto given by H.P. Blavatsky is that there is no religion higher than truth. To realize the conditions of spiritual existence of any sort, it is necessary to get above the plane of merely physical perceptions. One cannot see the things of the spirit with the eyes of the flesh, and one cannot successfully appreciate subjective causes by the physical senses. The great teachers have left lights of knowledge for us to consider on our own journey of self-effort. Today, we honor their work and the work of their companions along the way. 150 years ago, they lifted the veil that enfolds the truth a little more. And it is up to us to enliven their effort and make it a living reality in our own evolution of heart and mind. We begin with the tone of the Gayatri mantra given by Roshini, followed by a selection from the Great Master's letter read by Monica and Jerry.
Om Bhurbhuvah Suvah Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuvah Suvah Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuvah Suvah Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
We will now hear some selections from the Great Master's letter by Monica and Jerry.
The doctrine we promulgate, being the only true one, must, supported by such evidence as we are preparing to give, become ultimately triumphant, like every other truth. Yet it is absolutely necessary to inculcate it gradually, enforcing its theories, unimpeachable facts for those who know, with direct inference, deduced from and corroborated by the evidence furnished by modern, exact science, for our doctrines to practically react on the so-called moral code, or the ideas of truthfulness, purity, self-denial, charity, etc. We have to preach and popularize a knowledge of Theosophy. It is not the individual and determined purpose of attaining nirvana, the culmination of all knowledge and absolute wisdom, which is, after all, only an exalted and glorious selfishness, but the self-sacrificing pursuit of the best means to lead on the right path our neighbor, to cause to benefit by it as many of our fellow creatures as we possibly can, which constitutes the true theosophist.
Once unfettered and delivered from the dead weight of dogmatism, interpretations, personal names, anthropomorphic conceptions, and salaried priests, the fundamental doctrines of all religions will be proved identical in their esoteric meaning. Osiris, Krishna, Buddha, Christ will be shown as different means for one and the same royal highway to final bliss, nirvana.
Mystical Christianity teaches self-redemption through one's own seventh principle, the liberated Paramatma, called by the one Christ, by others Buddha. This is equivalent to regeneration or rebirth in spirit, and it therefore expounds just the same truth as the nirvana of Buddhism. All of us have to get rid of our own ego, the illusory, apparent self, to recognize our true self in a transcendental divine life. But if we would not be selfish, we must strive to make other people see that truth and recognize the reality of the transcendental self, the Buddha, the Christ, or God of every preacher.
Teach the people to see that life on this earth, even the happiest, is but a burden and an illusion, that it is our own karma, the cause producing the effect, that is our own judge, our savior in future lives, and the great struggle for life will soon lose its intensity. The world in general, and Christendom especially, left for 2,000 years to the regimen of a personal God, as well as to its political and social systems based on that idea, has now proved a failure.
Shall we devote ourselves to teaching a few and leaving the teeming millions of the ignorant, of the poor and oppressed to take care of themselves and of theirs hereafter as best they can? Never. Perish rather than Theosophical Society with both its hapless founders, than that we should permit it to become no better than an academy of magic and a hall of occultism. That we, the devoted followers of that spirit, incarnate of absolute self-sacrifice, of philanthropy, divine kindness, as of all the highest virtues attainable on this earth of sorrow, the man of men Gautama Buddha should ever allow the Theosophical Society to represent the embodiment of selfishness, the refuge of the few, with no thought in them for the many, is a strange idea, my brothers.
And it is we, the humble disciples of these perfect lamas, who are expected to allow the Theosophical Society to drop its noblest title, that of the brotherhood of humanity, to become a simple school of philosophy? No. No, good brothers, you have been laboring under the mistake too long already. Let us understand each other. He who does not feel competent to grasp the noble idea sufficiently to work for it need not undertake a task too heavy for him. But there is hardly a theosophist in the whole society able to effectually help it by correcting erroneous impressions of outsiders, by himself actually propagating this idea. Oh, for noble and unselfish men to help us effectually in that divine task. All our knowledge, past and present, would not be sufficient to repay him.
Having explained our views and aspirations, I have but a few words more to add. The true religion and philosophy offer the solution of every problem. That the world is in such a bad condition morally is a conclusive evidence that none of its religions and philosophies, those of the civilized races less than any other, has ever possessed the truth, the right and logical explanations on the subject of the problems of the great dual principles, right and wrong, good and evil, liberty and despotism, pain and pleasure, egotism and altruism, are as impossible to them as they were 1,880 years ago. They are as far from the solution as they were. But to these problems, there must be somewhere a consistent solution. And if our doctrines will show their competence to offer it, then the world will be the first to confess that there must be the true philosophy, the true religion, the true light, which gives truth and nothing but the truth. It is time that Theosophy should enter the arena. The Maha Chohan.
Our next reading is from the HPB. It's called What Are the Theosophists? And it's read by Gail.
All original thinkers and investigators of the hidden side of nature, whether materialists, those who find in matter the promise and potency of all terrestrial life, or spiritualists, that is, those who discover in spirit the source of all energy and of all matter as well, were and are properly Theosophists. For to be one need not necessarily recognize the existence of any special god or deity. One need but worship the spirit of living nature and try to identify oneself with it, to revere that presence, the invisible cause, which is yet ever manifesting itself in its incessant results, the intangible, omnipotent, and omnipresent Proteus, indivisible in its essence and eluding form, yet appearing under all and every form, who is here and there, and everywhere and nowhere, is all and nothing, ubiquitous yet one, the essence filling, binding, bounding, containing everything, contained in all. It will, we think, be seen now that whether classed as theists, pantheists, or atheists, such men are near kinsmen to the rest. Be what he may, once that a student abandons the old and trodden highway of routine and enters upon the solitary path of independent thought, Godward, he is a theosophist, an original thinker, a seeker after the eternal truth, with an inspiration of his own to solve the universal problems.
Gail, you know, when we read the letter from the Maha Chohan and we look at what HPB just said, they have given us the challenge and the right to make Theosophy a living reality in our life to whatever degree we can. To understand that, we'll have our next speaker, Wes, who will take us on a journey looking backward for the 150 years of the modern Theosophical movement.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, indeed. The last 150 years of the modern Theosophical movement has had a rough and difficult path. I'd like to share a few ideas and observations about that journey and the lessons we might learn from it. Hopefully, we can learn enough from the past to set the stage for at least the next 25 years, if not the next 50. My comments will not be complete, but certainly, and not certainly or authoritative in any way, but I hope they'll be useful. In a work such as ours, which has the amelioration of the suffering of humanity as its purpose, through a spreading broadcast of essential ideas, it would seem that the differences between and among the various groups and organizations dedicated to that work would be less important over time. An essential point is that history is about ideas. It's also about the people that hold them and try to implement them. But history is a guide. It's a lesson, but it's not an end in itself. As the Spanish historian 100 years ago, George Santayana wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." So let's look at the modern Theosophical movement from perspectives. First, a sort of generational survey, and then to look at some of the key impacts of the ideas and the activities of that time. Let's see what conclusions we might draw. To say that it's been a mixed success is to really oversimplify. Each generation has had its successes and its failures. And often they've repeated the same mistakes over and over again. But let's look at those generations. It's not a hard and fast timeline, but a kind of a rough outline. Our first generation was the initial impulse. Blavatsky, Judge, Alcott, the founding of the Theosophical Society, the writing of the original literature, a vast output of unique inspirational take on the idea of a universal divine wisdom. That first generation led to a second, roughly after 1900, where students and followers tried to assimilate, tried to understand what those teachings meant in practice. The message of the founders was often distorted, misplaced, unrealized, and it was at the same time a period of great influence of Theosophy on the world through art, symbolism, writers, poets, and a beginning re-recognition of the importance of the seminal teachings that Blavatsky and Judge and others had brought. The third generation from 1925 led to a broad, could say, back to Blavatsky movement, among other things. The collected writings were brought together, but there were failures as well. At any time individuals are put before principles and followers are asked, it creates a great deal of difficulty. The next generation followed a kind of a period of consolidation. The mid-20th century was a time of war and economic catastrophes. But at the same time, there were the seeds planted of cooperation, of beginning recognition of the value of the work of the founders. Following that, you had at a 100-year point, around 1975, recognition came to fore that those original works were really important. William Q. Judge was recognized at the Centennial Conference of the Theosophical Society in 1975. The following generation, we could say, that led up to the close of the 20th century was largely a period of disappointment and conflict over the apparent non-appearance of an expected great teacher. Meetings declined, activities slowed, but beneath the surface, there was still a lot of activity. The 21st century has brought us a new generation and the roots of opportunity with the internet, online meetings, non-local events. In-person meetings tend to be fewer, but the interest is still there. Nearby and worldwide, Theosophy has gained recognition in many ways. We are now at the 7th generation of Theosophists. This is the opportunity for the future. Despite all the obstacles within and without the Theosophical movement and the various groups, hey, we're still here. The various Theosophical groups are still active. And we, a few humble students of this wondrous ancient philosophy, are still here. So those generations point to several key ideas. We could say there are several themes that we could pick out. The key principles of the philosophy, the literature, the various groups and organizations, the activities and inter-organizational efforts, the initiatives of individuals, the influence of Theosophy on the world, and the influence on the inner world, the inner work, the hidden aspects of the Theosophical movement. The key principles and ideas are best exemplified by the symbolism of the emblem of the original Theosophical Society, which has become the emblem used by most Theosophical groups. And there we are. Thank you. With that symbol, there is that slogan, there is no religion higher than truth. This is a universal key, the key to the universal brotherhood and the spiritual evolution of all mankind. Our literature is an ongoing dynamic. There are two major threads in the literature. One, an attempt to keep the original teachings and their inspiration alive and vibrant and useful. And the other you could call the creative. All of the writing and the book and the articles and the magazines. I had a friend tell me years ago that there have been over 900 specifically Theosophical magazines since the initial founding of the Theosophical Society. 900 magazines. Theosophists apparently have a lot to say, at least a lot to say to each other. Go to the online bookstore of any of the societies and see a great variety of the literature. Sometimes you have to look hard to find the original writings. Other times they're featured prominently. And this is just a symptom of the ongoing task of authority versus individual initiative. There's clearly an audience for both kinds of work. Without the initial and original writings, we lose our focus. It's easy to get caught down a pathway of all sorts. Not saying that there's not a use for those words. And perhaps many that cling to and focus on the original writings are accused of being too fundamentalist or too metaphysical. And yet we have to remember that underlying all the activities of the world, all of the ethics that we're encouraged to follow and promulgate are metaphysical assumptions about the nature of the world, about the nature of unity, about the nature of life itself. Now, all of these organizations each has its own history, its own practices, its own, would say, self-view of its place in history, its purpose and culture, its importance, and those views necessarily include biases of all sorts. We could say generally these are of two types. They are strictly theosophical in the broadest sense. Theosophical Society, Adgar Wheaton, Theosophical Society, Pasadena, Point Loma, United Lodge of Theosophists, Temple of the People, I think still considers themselves core theosophical. And then there are all sorts of, we could call them, and not disparagingly, as a theosophical, the Philosophical Research Society, the Anthroposophy, um, and other groups. But more importantly than just the organizations have been all the inter-organizational efforts over the years. In the 1920s and 30s, we had a strong movement back to Blavatsky that involved students from all the organizations, all of the various theosophical traditions. Later, in the 1980s, we're aware of a notable cooperative effort, networking conferences brought together students from all over, focusing on the works of the teachers and an attempt to get past the organizational divides and schisms and so forth that had marked so much of our modern theosophical movement. There was in 1988 a Secret Doctrine Centennial Conference that brought together hundreds of students in Pasadena, California. There was also in 1991 HPB Centennial that brought together individuals. Not to mention the World Parliaments of Religion in 1995, I think, following Judge's example from the 19th century to join the World Parliaments. These efforts have been part of a quiet trend of individuals working together regardless of organization, sometimes without any recognition of organization, without fanfare, without much attention all to themselves. This kind of work is, you could say, part of the living shoots of the movement. It's the individual initiatives that have drawn on works such as that of Charles Johnston, who wrote in the early 20th century so much translation of the ancient wisdom from India. Other individuals brought together all of Blavatsky's work. Boris Dezerkov, notably, B.P. Wadia, pointed the way to an independent association of students without formal organizational ties, and everyone is welcome to that association. Manus Magazine brought an intelligent inquiry into first principles from a unstated and yet decidedly theosophic perspective. This was only part of the, could say, the influence of theosophy in the world. And there have been dozens of books written on the importance of theosophy in world thought, from agriculture and architecture and the arts to dance and ecology to economics and education, all fields of literature, music, and science have been influenced subtly, sometimes directly, through ideas found in theosophical writings or inspiration found from theosophical applications of those writings. An incalculable, incommensurable dimension to the theosophical movement is the inner work. Who could measure how much theosophy has meant to countless thousands of seekers of truth through the years? And these count from all the theosophical traditions, and regardless of theosophical organization or outer form work. Who knows what efforts have been made in self-discovery, in basically essentially spiritual alchemy that has planted the seeds in the lives and hearts and minds of men and women that will bear fruit and have borne fruit, not just in this lifetime, but in lifetimes to come. And unfortunately, many, if not most, of the dissensions and differences amongst students of Theosophy have been in this realm about the importance of one person or another's view of what is esoteric, of what is important, of what constitutes real Theosophy. I think the Master's letter has pointed out well that real Theosophy is altruism. That's the essence of it. Everything else is a supporting document, a supporting idea, something that points toward the truth. And so we should never make of Theosophy a religion nor a dogma. We could say that there are three aspects to this work, and we'll use this as a way to summarize: unity, study, and work. Key ideas that Robert Crosby pointed out in one of his talks of over 100 years ago, and yet they're still applicable. The unity is the essential nature of man and life. That essential nature then allows us to find common themes in the theosophical philosophy itself. The conflicts within and among the various groups matter far less than the common thread of ideas and principles of Theosophy and those who brought it as a means to serve humanity. The work is outer and it is inner. The work involves making sure that we put no one on a pedestal, but also understand Theosophy itself. It means study. It means we have to study and to know what those principles are so we can apply them. Apply them in our organizations, in our groups, in our interpersonal lives and applications of those ideas. And most of all, we need students that will work for Theosophy. The unity is essential. We work for the common good of humanity. We take the best ideas we can find, try to put them into practice. The study is to know what those ideas are so that we can help others learn the ideas. And the work is to make it known to others, to put it in practice in the world as far as possible. And one of the key things is that the real theosophical movement is eternal, it's ongoing, it's cooperative, and often only visible in its effects. And we should never confuse the external methods, the external means, with the real theosophical movement. These are some of the lessons that we can learn from the history, from our own history of the movement. Whenever individuals were put on pedestals, the work suffers. Whenever the key ideas are ignored or bypassed or somehow we find ourselves wandering down the pathways of psychism and personal promotion. That's where the theosophical movement weakens. But if we trust our teachers, trust the ideas that we read, and then try to apply, we will be fine in our next 150 years. Let's just keep in mind that Theosophy is the North Star. It's the central point on the compass that we can use to keep in mind and keep in balance all the applications and all of the various attempts that the world has to redirect us toward things that are less important. That reference point allows us to sort out whatever we read in whatever field. And so if we keep those ideas in mind, the practical arts, the philosophy, the science, the practical altruism be the natural result. So in this way, we can demonstrate that unity, study, and work that the teachers have asked us to do, and we will be in a better place to carry forward this seventh generation of Theosophists. I will leave it to others to talk about what some of those opportunities may be. But if we keep the philosophy in mind, keep in mind that we will work with students of any background, of any group or of none, any place in the world, anyone willing to learn Theosophy and put it into practice. Because it's been said, Theosophy is the friend of all movements that contribute to the amelioration and help of humanity's difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. And thank you for mentioning the 7 generations of students who have made possible for us the study of the original writings that we have before us today. And it also brings to mind our obligation for the 8th generation that soon follows, and keeping that line, as HPB said, unbroken. And in that light, we have a reading by Alan called Passing the Torch from the writings of William Q. Judge.
At the present time, one of the most urgent needs is for a simplification of theosophical teachings. Theosophy is simple enough. It is the fault of its exponents if it is made complicated, abstruse, or vague. Yet inquiring people are always complaining that it is too difficult a subject for them and that their education had not been deep enough to enable them to understand it. This is greatly the fault of the members who have put it in such a manner that the people sadly turn away. At public meetings or when trying to interest and inquire, it is absolutely useless to use Sanskrit, Greek, or other foreign words. 9 times out of 10, the habit of doing so is due to laziness or conceit. Sometimes it is due to having merely learned certain terms without knowing and assimilating the ideas underneath. The ideas of Theosophy should be mastered, and once that is done, it will be easy to express those in the simplest possible terms. And discussions about the absolute, the hierarchies, and so forth are worse than useless. Such ideas as karma, reincarnation, the perfectibility of man, the dual nature, are the subjects to put forward. These can be expounded. If you have grasped the ideas and made them part of your thought from 1,000 different points of view. At all meetings, the strongest effort should be made to simplify by using the words of our own language in expressing that which we believe. William Quan Judge, 1896.
You, Alan. So there it is. There's our challenge. And we have 7 generations of students who have shared the teachings with us up to this point to show us on how to keep the ideas and the thoughts simple, and maybe even to trust ourselves and rely less on the terms that we are given in some of the writings, and to look beneath the term for the true idea, because the idea is not the word itself. And so, in that light, we're going to continue to look forward to the civilization of the future, spoken by Kathy.
Friends, as we look to the future, many are asking, what kind of world do we want to create? One driven solely by technology and endless consumption, or one grounded in wisdom, compassion, and unity? Today, I'd like to share a vision of that future, not as an idealistic dream, but as a theosophical blueprint, holding the promise of a harmonious and sustainable world, deeply rooted in enlightened humanistic values. This vision is inspired by the insights of spiritual and humanistic thinkers across traditions. And these voices have long called for a profound shift in how we live and relate to one another, urging us to build a world aligned with our highest potential, spiritually, ethically, and socially. Before we explore this theosophical future, it helps to ground ourselves in a simple yet often overlooked truth. Humanity has made real progress. Though today's headlines can be grim, the historical record tells another story. Compared to centuries past, extreme poverty has declined, life expectancy has increased, literacy and education have expanded, and many once rigid social barriers have begun to erode. This isn't to say that suffering is gone or that injustice has vanished, but it's important to remember that evolution is real, both materially and spiritually. As the Mahatmas taught, humanity is on a long pilgrimage, not just biologically evolving, but consciously unfolding. So when we speak of a future civilization, we're not dreaming, we're tracing the next steps on an already unfolding journey. And the record of human progress made so far is a reason for confidence. Yet even with this progress, many people today feel discouraged. Cynicism seems to grow louder with each generation. And why is this? Psychology shows that our brains are wired to detect threats, and modern media amplifies this bias. Fear-based stories dominate our attention, while stories of cooperation, kindness, and innovation often go unnoticed. But Theosophy reminds us that consciousness precedes action. If we allow ourselves to dwell solely on decline, we risk enforcing it. If instead we cultivate noble visions of the future, we generate the magnetic force to help bring them into reality. As William Q. Judge once said, thoughts are things, and constructive thought is one of the most powerful forces available to us. If we can overcome our cynicism, we can move forward confidently and consistently with bringing about the needed conditions. What might a civilization rooted in theosophical principles look like? Imagine a world where the sacred and the scientific are not separate but integrated, where sacred geometry guides architecture, city planning, and even energy systems, where legal systems are not merely punitive, but informed by karmic and restorative principles, where the focus is on healing and independence, where education combines ethics, meditation, music, and mindfulness with academics, where healing includes not just the physical body, but the subtle energies and spiritual well-being of the patient, where ecological harmony shapes how we build homes, farm food, and power our cities, and where virtual reality fosters sacred connection, enabling people to meditate, study scripture, and engage in service together, regardless of where they live. These are not science fiction. They are seed ideas inspired by timeless principles, and they are already taking root. At the heart of the future civilization stands a single central truth, universal brotherhood. This is not sentiment, it is law. Brotherhood is a fact in nature because all life is one. This principle isn't just the first object of the Theosophical movement. It's the foundation from which all true social progress flows: social harmony, compassion, justice, and sustainability. As Robert Crosby noted, universal brotherhood is not optional. It is the key to solving the systemic problems of our age. Therefore, it's the foundation of the future and of all spiritually enlightened activism. Theosophy teaches that humanity is not static. We are evolving beings, and each soul is moving through cycles of birth, death, and rebirth in pursuit of spiritual realization. In a theosophical future, schools will not only teach facts, they will nurture the soul. As stated in The Voice of the Silence, enlightenment is not the end, but the beginning of a greater unselfish work, that of selfless service. Children's education, therefore, will help them discover their inner virtues, their sense of purpose in life, as well as their spiritual responsibility to others. Meditation, movement, art, and even silence. These will be as essential as math and language studies. Education will provide an individually tailored learning environment, but remain equitable for all. A civilization based on theosophical principles will take karma seriously. Actions have consequences, not just legally or socially, but spiritually. Karma teaches us that each of us holds responsibility for our actions, for our thoughts, and our values. We shape the world not only by what we do, but also by what we think and how we conduct ourselves. A society grounded in the truths of karma will prioritize compassion, healing, and the upliftment of all. If we act from the basis of brotherhood, the world we create will reflect it. Therefore, justice will focus not on punishment, but on learning, healing, and transformation. Poverty, inequality, and violence will be addressed not just as social and political problems, but as failures of spiritual imagination. Inspired by Gandhi's concept of sarvodaya, the welfare of all, society will work toward uplifting every individual. A theosophically informed economy will look very different from what we see today. Rather than being driven by endless consumption, it would follow the principles outlined by E.F. Schumacher in his treatise on Buddhist economics, An Economy as if People Mattered. Work would be more than just a means of survival. It would be a path for spiritual development. As J.C. Kumarappa said, if the nature of the work is properly appreciated and applied, it will stand in the same relation to the higher faculties as food is to the physical body. It nourishes and enlivens the higher man and urges him to produce the best he is capable of. It directs his free will along the proper course and disciplines the animal in him into progressive channels. Meaningful work should do three things. 1, develop our abilities and potential. 2, draw us out of egoism by joining together with others in common tasks. And 3, it should contribute to the well-being of the whole. Simplicity, localism, and sustainability will guide economic life. Communities will prioritize small-scale, human-centered development that addresses their unique issues over centralized, profit-driven systems. And technology will be used to serve life, not to dominate it. Buckminster Fuller envisioned a world in which technology and design serve spiritual evolution. His geodesic domes were efficient, but they were also expressions of harmony and sacred geometry. Fuller believed that lasting change does not come just from argument, but rather it comes from creating better tools, better systems, and better environments. He showed through the use of anticipatory design and engineering that people will always use the best tools and systems available. In this way, theosophy and design thinking share a powerful synergy. In a theosophical future, technology aligned with spirituality could manifest in various ways as technological harmony, where ethical AI systems will be trained on and guided by the principles of karma, cycles, long-term well-being, sustainability, and universal justice. Mindfulness apps will teach meditation, emotional intelligence, and foster genuine spiritual growth, not just stress relief. They will help us with making major life decisions. Holistic health technologies will address body, mind, and soul in an integrated way. Diagnostically, a holistic health system will be available to diagnose diseases, not just based on symptoms, but on a holistic view of the individual, incorporating data on emotional states, sleep disturbance, recent life events, and even spiritual practices. Virtual reality technology will offer immersive virtual retreats, bringing sacred teachings, rituals, and meditation to a global audience. In a theosophical future, technology will be used to uplift all people. So where does an individual begin? We begin, as always, with ourselves. As H.P. Blavatsky emphasized, the path is both individual and universal at the same time. Each soul must awaken the divine within, and each person has the power to bring light into the world. Theosophy doesn't ask us to escape the world, it asks us to transform it. And that transformation begins within. As Gandhi showed, one soul acting with truth and compassion can move millions. The civilization of the future is not a distant utopia. It is the natural flowering of spiritual truths already known and increasingly lived. If we envision a world rooted in universal brotherhood, spiritual evolution, compassion, and ethical responsibility, and if we commit to living those principles now, we can help bring that world into being. Let us hold this vision not as wishful thinking, but as a sacred duty. Let us align our thoughts, actions, and systems with the truth that all life is one. And let us walk forward, not in fear, but in wisdom, in service, and in love. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. That was a wonderful synthesis of 40 years of Manus magazine with the light of Theosophy shone through it. It's interesting to note in your talk that we have to work through the karmic conditions of our past, not kick against them, but work through them towards the forms and the future that we wish to manifest. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the work of the teachers. So our next speaker, or our next reading, is going to be spoken from the writings of Robert Crosby, and it will be spoken in Spanish and English. It's The Great Purpose. It's from his article on the law of correspondence. And we can note that there is a very strong Spanish-speaking student body in America, and that is growing, and might be a form of the 7th and 8th generation, carrying forward the message of Theosophy. So Lizeth will do the reading, both in Spanish and English. Thank you, Lizeth.
Thank you, Laura. Estamos aquí para un gran propósito, una gran misión, yace ante cada uno de nosotros, así como también un gran conocimiento. Estamos aquí como seres de conocimiento, autoconscientes, enterrados e identificados con este cuerpo, con este material. Enredados en el mismísimo trabajo que tenemos que hacer en este plano del ser, hemos olvidado nuestras verdaderas naturalezas. Nos incumbe entender lo que es nuestra verdadera naturaleza y actuar en concordancia con ella. Permitámonos recordar también que la verdadera naturaleza no está lejos, está justo dentro de nosotros, dentro de nuestros corazones. En el silencio de nuestros propios corazones, allí late esa vida única, que palpita en correspondencia con la acción de los pulmones, la acción de las mareas, el flujo y el reflujo que sigue su camino todo el tiempo y en todo lugar en la naturaleza. ¿No vemos que las leyes de correspondencia son las mismas ahora que las que eran hace millones de años? Tampoco ha cambiado la humanidad. Hemos cambiado las condiciones que nos rodean, pero nosotros mismos estamos experimentando los mismos deseos, los mismos sentimientos, las mismas estupideces que fueron nuestros hace millones de años. No hemos avanzado espiritualmente más allá de las civilizaciones que están muertas, pero en lo que llamamos avance, meramente hemos creado un vínculo más estrecho con la existencia física. Por lo tanto, tenemos mucho que aprender. Robert Crosby. We are here for a great purpose. A great mission lies before every one of us, as well as a great knowledge. We are here as knowing, self-conscious beings, buried in and identified with this body, with this matter, involved in the very work we had to do on this plane of being. We have forgotten our own true natures. It behooves us to understand what our true nature is and to think and act in accordance with it. Let's also remember, too, that the true nature is not far away. It is right within us, within our hearts. In the silence of our hearts, there pulsates that one life, which beats in correspondence in the action of the lungs, the action of the tide, the flux and reflux, which is going on all the time and everywhere in nature. Can we not see that the laws of correspondences are the same now that they were millions of years ago? Nor has humanity changed. We have changed the conditions surrounding us, but we ourselves are experiencing the same desires, the same feelings, the same stupidities, which were our millions of years ago. We have not advanced spiritually beyond the civilizations that are dead and gone. But in what we call advancement, we have made merely another closer bond to the physical existence. So there is much for us to do. Thank you.
Elizabeth. Our next speaker is John. He'll be speaking of the work that we have to do, as Robert Crosby indicated. There is much that we all can do. We should not underestimate the power of our being and our abilities to broadcast the teachings of Theosophy. So John will share with us our opportunities of the present.
Thank you, Laura. I had some notes I've been making over the past while for this talk, but I really wanted to wait and leave it a bit open until I heard Wes's recounting of the history and Kathy's talk, which was a beautiful vision of the future. Because I want to draw a little bit on the history and kind of tie in a little bit to what some of those two talks were discussing. One of the things that Wes touched on in a couple places, he made a couple powerful statements, I thought, about when individuals are put before principles or when individuals are put on pedestals, and that's when we see the real work suffering and we see lots of difficulties arise. And one of the things that he mentioned briefly in his talk was the the waiting for a teacher or waiting for a messenger. And if we look at the history of the Theosophical movement from the point when Blavatsky and some of the early founders passed away, and there's branches that occurred in the movement, all of those branches fell into the same trap that we see in most, if not all, traditions, which is the waiting for someone to come, the waiting for a messenger, the waiting for a great teacher. And what we see when you look at the history of the last 150 years is a fairly high degree of passivity in attitude and approach that sets in because I think, in my estimation, due to that keynote of waiting for the next messenger or waiting for the next Blavatsky to show up. And so what has happened in the Theosophical movement, if we sort of diagnose the present of the Theosophical movement, is that a sort of passivity has set in that has become a somewhat of a standard approach. There's a fairly common, no matter where you go in the Theosophical movement, of a little bit of a wait for them to come to us type of approach. So we hold our meetings, we have our centers, we have our activities, and in general, we are waiting for people to come to us to engage in theosophical ideas with us. If we observe the past 50, 60 years of the Theosophical movement, we can see, I think, that this isn't really working particularly well. Numbers have dwindled over that time. Numbers of really active workers for the Theosophical movement has declined, while at the same time the average age is increasing in all Theosophical groups. I was laughing to myself when I was thinking about this part of what I wanted to say, because I don't know if everybody knows what Blavatsky's nickname was when she was in the Theosophical movement. Her nickname was the OL, which stood for the old lady, and she was in her 50s and 60s. And so the reason she was called the old lady was because the majority of active workers in the Theosophical Society at that time were in their 20s and 30s. So this has changed drastically. And if you look at the landscape of the modern Theosophical movement, we see that it's an aging population with not very many young people coming to us. So I think one of the things that we can look at when we sort of identify what are the opportunities that are there for us in the present is what are we doing and how are we doing it? So I think we have two things to approach here. One is address that type of passivity or that type of wait to come to us approach that has been happening, and we can tie that into Blavatsky's warnings about passivity in occultism, because I think it applies to our approach to the world as well. And then we can look at the example set by the founders of the Theosophical Society, and we see when we look at their stories a very different approach. There was not very much wait and let them come to us approach in Blavatsky's life or Olcott's life or Judge's life, as three of the primary examples. And I wanted to give some sort of quick examples of that. And one that is primary is, one of the main things that the Blavatsky and Olcott and their teachers were doing at that time was they were saying, okay, where is help needed? And then they were actually going there. They were physically going where help was needed. So the first example of that is the spiritualists. The spiritualists were engaging in all kinds of practices that they didn't understand fully and were dangerous, and they were causing harm without realizing it. So what did HPB do? She went with them. She went and she literally sat in their seances with them and gradually engaged them and began discussing. And over time, over a span of years, began introducing ideas that could help sort of course correct some of the pitfalls of what they were doing. If you take the Buddhists in Sri Lanka, for instance, the Buddhists were being persecuted. They were losing touch with their own tradition. The HPB and Olcott went there with them. They even took the vow of the Buddhist vows with them there. And Olcott dedicated a good deal of his life to reviving the Buddhist tradition in Sri Lanka. The entire movement to India of the founders was in the same vein. It was, the Indians were under the dominance of the British at the time. The education was all being moved over and organized and run by Christian missionaries. So India was losing its own way and its own identity. And so they went there and they worked on the ground with the people and helped reinvigorate their spirituality. So I think when we look at, often when we look at the theosophical history, we talk about the literature and the writings and the ideas and stuff, but there was a lot of action that was happening among the early founders, and I think we can draw inspiration from that in what we ought to be doing. So one of the things we see today is that not a lot of young people are coming to Theosophy. Not a lot are coming to theosophical organizations. Not a lot are joining in theosophical activities. So the question arises, where are they? It's not that suddenly there's no spiritual seekers among young people. That's not the case. So where are they going? So there's a few places, a few things that are happening right now. One is there's actually, especially in America, a revival of Christianity among youth. And this is being driven by really authentic speakers who are not speaking from their churches. They're going to college campuses. They're going out and engaging individual young people and discussing ideas with them. A lot of young people who are spiritual seekers are going to Buddhism, and that's driven primarily by a need for practice. They're wanting something tangible, something spiritually tangible in themselves. But by far the most dominant factor and the most dominant place, let's say, that young people are going right now is into a kind of pure materialism. And this is being force-fed. If you look in education systems, it's being force-fed from a very young age. Young people are being given a very shallow vision of life, a very shallow vision of what humanity is. And they're coming away with it with a lot of hopelessness and a lot of apathy. They're settling into a state where they view humanity as clever animals who are up to no good, who are like viruses on the earth. This is the vision of humanity that young people are being given today. Now, one of the things that the more spiritually minded young people are doing in response to that, is they're seeking out another type of spirituality that's becoming very popular, and that's psychedelic spirituality. This is becoming increasingly popular among youth. And what they're doing in these is they're using what they've referred to as plant medicines. These are things like ayahuasca and such to induce altered states of consciousness. Now, this is driven partly because the world they live in, the vision they have of the world, is deeply troubling and difficult and hopeless. And so there's a desire among youth to move away from the world in which they live and try to find something else. And so they're falling into these traditions where the solution that's being presented to the state they find themselves in is an induction of altered states of consciousness. Now, if we read Blavatsky's writings and we read the Maha letters and things like that, we will find dire, dire warnings against some of these kinds of practices. And it's not to say that the idea of the psychedelics is entirely bad or anything like that, but it's to say that without a proper foundation, without a higher philosophy, without a greater vision of what humanity is, they can be very dangerous. So if you can imagine a young person who just thinks that humans are barely more than animals, and they have a hopeless vision of humans on Earth, bringing themselves into a psychedelic ceremony and altering their state of consciousness like that, the end result is not necessarily going to be very positive. And so young people are still seeking spirituality. They're still seeking higher truths. But they're being given opportunities that are not necessarily going to be incredibly helpful for them. And this kind of arena is where I see the present opportunity for Theosophists in abundance among all of these groups, all of these places that young people are going. The ultimate thing is that I don't think that we can wait for them to come to us. This is one of the, I think, fundamental flaws with what we're currently doing. We have to follow our founders' leads and go to them, find our way to where they are, engage with them where they're at, and find ways to discuss ideas with them. Blavatsky didn't show up to the spiritualists and on day one walk into a seance and say, you guys are all wrong. This is all bad. Everything you're doing is terrible. The real truth is this, this, this. She went, she engaged, they embraced her. She approached them like brothers and sisters and sat with them. And gradually over time did a world of good for those who were in that environment. I think we can do the same thing. Now, of course, today we see the internet as a great opportunity, and it definitely is. It especially is a great opportunity in terms of putting the ideas of Theosophy in front of a larger audience. But the more I've engaged over the last several years in both online and in-person meeting with people who are not Theosophists and discussing theosophical ideas with them, the more I see the need for actually being with someone where they're at and beginning from there. So I think the present opportunity is there, and it's really up to each Theosophist to try to make this survey for themselves of where are the people who are in the greatest need, or not necessarily even that, but where are the people that Theosophy could do the greatest good for? And we identify that, then we need to go out actively in the world and engage. So I think that's the path forward for us, and it's on us to make that, to go out into the world and to do good. Like the Great Master's letter says about real Theosophy is altruism, and as both Wes and Kathy pointed out, the universal brotherhood is really the core keynote of what we're doing here. So we need to go out and be brothers and sisters to those who are ready and in need of some of the wisdom that Theosophy has given us in our lives. Thank you.
John, you've given us much to consider. We see on the internet many little snippets of Theosophy being expressed, like the similarity between Jesus and Krishna and Buddha, and the ideas of, especially in the quantum physics, the expansion that is there. And maybe these are some of the tools which we can use to introduce Theosophy to some of the young people. It reminds me of what Tagore said. He said that there's not much we can give young people, but make sure that what it is the best and the highest possible. And so we will have a musical interlude, shedding a little light. Maybe we can reflect on some of the ways in which we can introduce Theosophy to the young people. Thank you.
Let us turn our thoughts today to Martin Luther King and recognize that there are ties between us, all men and women living on the earth, ties of hope and love, of sister and brotherhood, and we are bound together in our desire to see the world become a place in which our children can grow free and strong. We are bound together by the task that stands before us and the road that lies ahead. We are bound, we are bound.
There's a feeling like the clenching of a fist. There's a hunger in the center of the chest. There's a passage through the darkness and the mist. And though the body sleeps, the heart will never rest.
Shed a little light, oh
Shed a little light, oh Lord, oh,
so we can see.
so we can see.
Just a little light, oh
Just a little
Lord.
light, oh Lord. on the hill. And I know you know what I mean, 'cause you shed a little light, oh Lord. Shed a little light, oh Lord. So we can see, oh yeah. Just a little light, oh Lord. Just a little light, oh Lord. Can we stand it on up? Stand it on up. Yeah. Stand it on up. Oh Lord. Oh Lord, walk it on down. Shed a little light, oh There is a feeling like the clenching of a fist. There is a hunger in the center of the chest. Oh no. There is a passage through the darkness and the mist. Oh no. And though the body sleeps, the heart will never rest. No. Let us turn our thoughts today to Martin Luther King
and recognize that there are ties between us, all men and women living on the earth, ties of hope and love, of sister and brotherhood.
Our next speaker is Helena. She will share with us the heroic women in the modern Theosophical movement.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our birthday, 150 years. They say that in the new year, and also on your birthday, the astral light is young and strong and ready to receive and give a new impulse. But what kind of an impulse will we give it? That's the question. So, interestingly, today, here we are in New York, and 150 years ago, there was an impulse. And I was wondering how much today's anniversary feels like that impulse. Madame Blavatsky and the masters chose New York to give an impulse. And I can understand why we have so many different groups of people. It's such a cosmopolitan area. What a wonderful place that they chose to start to disseminate this impulse, an impulse that's always there, that impulse. And when I think of the challenges that she was facing, the diversity was great, but if there was one attribute she had, I would say courage. She was a straight shooter, came straight from the heart, and that was part of her message. And also, like today, we see that the world around us has its challenges. We're just out of a big pandemic of COVID. And I remember the feeling of hopelessness and despair. How are we going to spread broadcast the teachings of Theosophy when we can't go out and meet? That was a big one. And our children too, we all had to get through it. But you would think the light might have been extinguished, but I think of Judge, picture of the archer, instead, what happened is we had to disseminate and spread broadcast the teachings in a whole new medium, meetings on the internet, until we could get back together again in person. So what looked like a horrible challenge to the movement actually turned out to be an impulse that resulted in many, many meetings all over. It's a resurgence, as far as I can tell, of the teachings of Theosophy. And so we not only survived that challenge, but we're thriving. And I think very much the same thing was going on 150 years ago. There were daunting challenges. And HPB was a writer. She was an author. But I think if she were here today, just like back then, she wouldn't want to be remembered for herself, but for the teachings and the teachers that she was sharing, and bravely putting out there. So when I think of the children and what we've all been through with them, and I'm very concerned with that, I say, connect to them, have them transmute their feelings of hopelessness, challenge them, expect that they'll have the answers that we need for this time. We were born into this moment, and we accept those challenges and we thrive on those challenges, and they help to develop us. And there's an acceptance of our karma. Now, I have to tell you, when I started looking at all the women, more and more names started coming up, and I asked a lot of people, who do you think? And it was just to get us to be mindful of all the fabulous men and women. I want to, say thank you to the men as well, but my focus will be on the women in this movement. So, and certainly Theosophy and these ideas it's like the ideas it was their time, and there's certain ideas, when their time has come, you can't stop them. And I feel like that was also a part of this impulse. These great ideas, and the world was ready for them. I think that's why it spread so rapidly at the time through Judge, etc., and the Parliament and all those actions. But there were individual people who, when they were exposed to these teachings, they really, I want to say, self-actualized, and then they became these channels for all of this wisdom to work through in their own way. So we can see that there are many, many movements and offshoots of the original movement. Now, there are so many people, and if I forget to mention some, I'm really sorry. But I thought I would just cover some of the majors and give credit where credit is due. So if we go back contemporary to HPB, there was the Countess Constance Wachtmeister. Was a dear friend of Madame Blavatsky. She was a Swedish noblewoman, a writer and a translator. Translators are very important to the movement. She was HPB's companion. She edited The Practical Vegetarian, and she was responsible for putting out the idea of the one life, in all forms, and respecting it and practicing that. Then we also thought of just going down to some of the majors. Sophia Wadia, a major figure in ULT internationally. She co-founded the Indian Institute of World Culture. She edited the Aryan Path, and she worked very closely with BP Wadia within the ULT framework and recognized internationally. There's so many. Anna Kingsford, an English anti-vivisectionist, a theosophist, and also a proponent of vegetarianism, a women's rights campaigner. She was one of the first English women to obtain a degree in medicine after Elizabeth Garrett Anderson, and the only medical student of the time to graduate without having experimented on a single animal. Let's see. How about here? Down my list. And then we get, and I'm going to go down a list of them later, but I'm just going to hit on a few of the majors here. And then we move into another time period. We get more current, and we see people like Nandini Iyer, and in an article by her son, in the obituary, he writes that she was a philosopher and educator whose teachings at the Institute of World Culture integrate Eastern philosophy and universal ethics. A very, very bright light. We have, for those who are interested, especially in the life of HPB, we have Anita Atkins. Also, her pen name was Sylvia Cranston, from the New York Lodge, and she wrote HPB, The Extraordinary Life and Influence of Elena Blavatsky, dear friend of mine who I met in a Theosophy school. She was one of my first teachers. I get choked up thinking about her, and she she was an author like HPB, and the proceeds of all her books was rededicated to getting to spread broadcasting the teachings of Theosophy into libraries and getting them out there. A huge, wonderful influence. And then we have, let's see, do I have all my slides? I'm going to just, yeah. Okay, now there were so many people, so I'm just going to go down a lot of these names. There was Helena Rourke in art. There was the founder of Findhorn. I think that was Ruth St. Davis. There was Willie Dade in Brookings. There's Helen Valberg. There was Grace Kanicki, Joy Mills. There were people like Radna Bernier. I mean, there's so many in the Theosophical Society, wonderful, wonderful people. Annie Besant. The list just goes on and on. Mabel Collins, great author, many books, Light on the Path, especially dear to me and many of us. There were Alice Bailey. It was an influence and offshoot. And then you think about people today like Jane Goodall, who just passed away, who had studied in London. There were influences that in education, like Maria Montessori, huge, huge influence. Of course, there's anthroposophy and healing, the healing arts. So we had many, many incredible women. And I want to thank also the women of today, at our lodges. I think the impulse that I'd like for the people 150 years from now to receive is one of gratitude. I think that's a very important message. I think HPB honored all these ancient teachers who carried the message, many of them anonymously, forward so that we can have them. And I'd like to express my appreciation. I think that's what her work represented. It's a tremendous amount of gratitude towards her teachers and to this great chain of beings who carry the message. And hopefully, also, I think in terms of today, she addressed the issues of her day, as did many of these women. And they looked at the challenges and said, so where can I help? How can I help? What do we need? So these days, we have on the physical plane the challenges of buildings, we have the challenges of technology, and this Mercury retrograde sure is one of them. So we're learning how to pour Theosophy into different vehicles, and the internet. There are many different mediums, but there's also the media, and people are concerned about how is it that we're going to deal with the astral, the astral light. If you look around today, there have been studies now. It's becoming quite obvious that the phones, the devices, the electromagnetic field that we're picking up can become addictive, and people who are at risk can be highly affected by them. So how can we use these technologies in a safe way? The studies are showing that the brain of someone who's become addicted, doom scrolling, etc., the EMFs can penetrate and reactivate old addictions, serious ones that have been under control, for many, many years, suddenly relapsing and penetrating up to 6 centimeters into the brain, all these EMFs where detoxification is needed. So I see centers forming for this and for learning how to use these tools productively. We see magnetism, magic, the pursuit of the minerals and to fuel all this technology and this race to do what exactly. That to me, that's the great question, because what are we to do, dear, with all of this? I know when we're working to run a race. My grandfather was a marathon runner, and I remember his words. You have to practice. You have to run. That's how you get to be a good runner. And I guess for Theosophy, it would be study. I do think in the future, what I see is small groups, a lot of smaller groups getting together. Because when you have a classroom with a dozen people in it, you can really feel the light of Theosophy coming through these small groups. I think we're getting away from the big grand lecture series, and we're actually getting out there, by many, many smaller impulses. And that's good. It's
You
just
bring
the
up a
picture.
good point.
Yeah, the picture looks different. So I would say, is it about that time?
Mhm.
I would say the most important thing would be Theosophy. Be Theosophy. Carry the message forward with confidence and with faith, like they say in the Gita, having faith and a sense of expectancy that these ideas really do work, because they do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helena. I think the most important part of your talk was that we're all a link in a chain, and we all have an important role to play. And even going back to what John said, is recognizing that, we're that not to be too humble, but to recognize that we have something to contribute. And you always remind us of that. So thank you so much. Our next reading is from Damodar Mavalankar, and he's reading on true devotion. And Thea will read for us. Thank you, Thea.
Raj Yoga encourages no sham, requires no physical postures. It has to deal with the inner man whose sphere lies in the world of thought. To have the highest ideal placed before oneself and strive incessantly to rise up to it is the only true concentration recognized by esoteric philosophy, which deals with the inner world of noumena, not the outer shell of phenomena. The first requisite for it is thorough purity of heart. Well might the student of occultism say, with Zoroaster, that purity of thought, purity of word, and purity of deed, these are the essentials of one who would rise above the ordinary level and join the gods. A cultivation of the feeling of unselfish philanthropy is the path which has to be traversed for that purpose. For it is that alone which will lead to universal love, the realization of which constitutes the progress towards deliverance from the chains forged by Maya around the ego. No student will attain this at once, but, as our venerated Mahatma says in the occult world, the greater the progress towards deliverance, the less this will be the case until, to crown all, human and purely individual personal feelings, blood ties and friendship, patriotism and race predilection will all give way to become blended into one universal feeling, the only true and holy, the only unselfish and eternal one, love, and immense love for humanity as a whole. In short, the individual is blended with the all. Damodar K. Mavalankar.
Thank you. Now a short tribute by Vikash on Damodar K. Mavalankar. Thank you.
The Maha Chohan mentioned in his letter, and I quote, "For our doctrines to practically react on the so-called moral code or the ideas of truthfulness, purity, self-denial, charity, etc., we have to preach and popularize a knowledge of Theosophy. It is not the individual and determined purpose of attaining oneself nirvana, the culmination of all knowledge and absolute wisdom, which is after all, only an exalted and glorious selfishness. But the self-sacrificing pursuit of the best means to lead on the right path our neighbor, to cause as many of our fellow creatures as we possibly can to benefit by it, which constitutes the true Theosophist. Damodar K. Mavlankar had all these qualities. He was a true mumukshutva, that is, with a one-pointed, intense, burning desire to become better able to help and teach others. Damodar's significance to the Theosophical movement lies not merely in his consistent hard work for the society or in his intelligent defense of the embattled society at that time, but primarily in the fact that he set a standard for the Theosophic conduct. When very young, he became gravely ill and was expected to die. During the worst of this period, he had a vision in which a resplendent being ministered to him and he soon recovered. He saw this being twice again in visions, once when seriously ill and once in a deep state of meditation. When Damodar entered the headquarters of the Theosophical Society in Mumbai, he was stunned to see a portrait of the man who had appeared thrice in his visions and to learn that this Mahatma was one of those behind H.P. Blavatsky and the Theosophical movement. Convinced that he had found the gate that leads to the path of truth, Damodar applied for membership in the TS on July 13, 1879. On August 3, he was initiated into the society. Shortly thereafter, he wrote, "It is no exaggeration to say that I have been a really living man only these few months. For between life as it appears to me now and life as I comprehended it before, there is an unfathomable abyss. I feel now, for the first time, I have a glimpse of what man and life are. The nature and powers of the one, the possibilities, duties, and the joys of the other." By one of his letters to William Conjudge, he said, I quote, Your only desire should be to do everything for humanity and not for yourself. That is, although you are in the world, your inner man should be out of it. When you do this much, you will know other means of accomplishing your aim from the adepts. Then in a subsequent letter to WQJ, he wrote, I know that Madame Blavatsky, whom I revere as my guru, esteem as my benefactor, and love more than a mother, and others whose mere recollection gives my heart a thrill that makes me quiver with veneration, have done me favors I am not the least deserving of. About a month after I joined the society, I felt as it were a voice within myself whispering to me that Madame Blavatsky is not what she represents herself to be. I thought it must be some great Indian adept that had assumed that illusionary form. By 1880, the eye of the master was upon Damodar. Towards the end of the year, he had seen adepts in their astral forms and had been taken on an astral journey by one of them. Damodar mentions in one of his letters, Brother ordered me to follow him. After going a short distance of about half a mile, we came to a natural subterranean passage which is under the Himalayas. The path is very dangerous. There is a natural causeway on the river Indus which flows underneath in all its fury. Only one person can walk on it at a time, and one false step seals the fate of the travelers. Besides this causeway, there are several valleys to be crossed. After walking a considerable distance through this subterranean passage, we came into an open plain in Ladakh. There is a large, massive building thousands of years old. In front of it is a huge Egyptian Tao. The building rests on 7 big pillars in the form of pyramids. The entrance gate has a large triangular arc. Inside are various apartments. The building is so large that I think it can easily contain 20,000 people. I was shown some of these compartments. This is the chief central place where all those of our group who are found deserving into mysteries have to go for their final ceremony and stay there the requisite period. I went up with my guru to the great hall. The grandeur and serenity of the place is enough to strike anyone with awe. The beauty of the altar, which is in the center and at which every candidate has to take his vows, is sure to dazzle the most brilliant eyes. The splendor of the chief's throne is incomparable. Everything is on a geometrical principle, containing various symbols which are explained later, but I cannot say more now as I come now under the obligation of secrecy, which then a letter which he received from one of the masters confirmed the reality of this astral journey. Damodar earned the privilege of meeting the master in physical form in Lahore in November 1883. Of the 70 odd Theosophists who presented themselves for the discipleship, Damodar was virtually the only complete success. A desire to see the adepts in person or to witness phenomena caused many to accept the rigors of chelaship. But one by one, as they placed their own personalities and idiosyncrasies above the common good of the movement, failed. He alone achieved the honor of being allowed to travel to his master's ashram in Tibet. We may ask, how did he achieve this? Damodar says, and I quote, Krishna is the logos in us. The divine principle in man is indivisible. The human soul is universal. He who would live and enjoy eternal life must live and unite the human soul with the divine principle. The divine spirit is all pervading, and those who put themselves en rapport with the divine spirit are necessarily en rapport with all other entities, who are also en rapport with it. Hence, the Mahatmas who are conscious of the Logos are in constant magnetic relation to those who succeed in extricating themselves from the lower animal nature and by evolving the higher manas to unite it permanently with Buddhi and Atma. End of quote. Which means that only by this means that we can reach the Mahatmas. One of the cornerstones upon which the superstructure of Theosophical Society has been reared is inscribed with the name of Damodar. Perhaps in the future cycles, phoenix-like will he return as an adept in his own right, redeeming the anguished hopes of many who believe that there is no religion higher than truth. Thank you.
Gosh. We'll move right into a reading called The Fiery Brooding. It's on meditation from the writings of George William Russell, and that will be read by Gail. Thank you, Gail.
The meditation they urged on us has been explained as the inexpressible yearnings of the inner man to go out into the infinite. But that infinite we would enter is living. It is the ultimate being of us. Meditation is a fiery brooding on that majestical self. We imagine ourselves into its vastness. We conceive ourselves as mirroring its infinitudes as moving in all things, as living in all beings, in earth, water, air, fire, ether. We try to know as it knows, to live as it lives, to be compassionate as it is compassionate. We equal ourselves to it that we may understand it and become it. We do not kneel to it as slaves, but as children of the King. We lift ourselves up to that glory and affirm to ourselves that we are what we imagine. What a man thinks, that he is. That is the old secret, said the wise. We have imagined ourselves into this pitiful dream of life. By imagination and will, we re-enter true being, becoming that we conceive of. On that path of fiery brooding, I entered.
Thank you very much. That idea of brooding on the majestical self takes us back to what John said, that we maybe part of that brooding is thinking, how can we reach the self of all? How can we speak to the self of all in all the humanity that is around us? And in light of that, we have a tribute by Susan on the life and work of George William Russell. Thank you.
George William Russell, A.E., the Irish mystic, painter, poet, economist, and theosophist, was born in Northern Ireland in 1867. Of his mystical experiences, he wrote, "The visible world became like a tapestry, blown and stirred by the winds behind it. The color of daffodils seemed to him the expression of the radiant beauty of a higher mind, and every flower was a word spoken by the gods." He considered his experiences unique and personal, but he later found accounts by others of similar experiences, and philosophical confirmation of their validity when he was introduced to theosophical literature by his friends, the poet W.B. Yeats and the scholar Charles Johnston. The three founded the Hermetic Society in 1885, which later became the Dublin Lodge. Russell embarked on a course of rigorous study and service. He traveled to London, where he met H.P. Blavatsky, and saw her again when she visited Dublin in 1888. She was, he said, a cosmos in an ailing woman's body. He met WQJ in Dublin, who, he said, never spoke of what he did not know and was the wisest and sweetest man he had ever met. Russell felt that the cultivation of divine insight and imagination through mystical apprehensions, intellectual inquiry, meditation, and self-study must be grounded in the knowledge of the fundamental laws of nature and karma. From 1890 to 1897, he lived communally with fellow Theosophists, studying and discussing such texts as the Secret Doctrine, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Light of Asia. with others from the wider literary and artistic communities often joining in. He became editor of the Irish Theosophist and contributed to publications on Celtic mythology and other topics, for he held that the immortal spirit in us has memory of all its wisdom and is the real basis of the imagination. And when it speaks, we feel truly inspired. For Russell, the recognition of the spiritual unity of life and service to humanity grounded one on the path of brotherhood. He worked in many causes, theosophic, economic, and literary, and was a leader in the Irish agricultural and cooperative movement to alleviate poverty and foster reform. Upon his death in 1935, his funeral procession was a mile long. Yet he was nearly forgotten in later years. He was truly the embodiment of humility and grace. P.L. Travers, the author of Mary Poppins, said of him, "His story is the story of a soul, and therefore cannot be bound by geographical limits or biographical events." Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Our next reading is from Charles Johnson and On the Theosophical Movement. It will introduce a talk by Russ on the tribute to the life and work of Charles Johnson. So, Patrice, thank you.
For I have hitherto spoken of something larger and more inclusive, the Theosophical Movement. Madame Blavatsky always spoke of the Theosophical Movement as being, as it were, a wave of force, set in motion by masters, the elder brothers of humanity, and destined to bring spiritual life to the hearts of men. The Theosophical Movement has many expressions. Of these, the Theosophical Society is one. If I were asked what the Theosophical Society is, I should be inclined to say that, for me, it stands for a state of mind, or rather an attitude of the heart. That attitude is essentially this: to put my own interest as secondary and the interest of my friend as primary. To be more willing to hear than to speak. To endeavor always to see the truth in my neighbor's heart, rather than to seek to impose my own view of truth. Instead of antagonism, the Theosophical Society should bring unity of heart. When in action we make the interests of others primary and keep our own interests in the second place, we bring unity. We must by no means fall into the error of thinking that this will mean giving way to our neighbor, letting him get the better of us, yielding to him in a servile way. That could never be for his interest, and in doing this, we should by no means be putting his interest first. Cowardice is one thing. Devotion to the interests of another is quite a different thing, and one calling for high courage as well as self-sacrifice. Gently to hear, kindly to judge. This is the principle for which the Theosophical Society stands. Genuine toleration, an entire willingness to hear the other side, a readiness to accept new truth. This attitude in action is well described in the primary object of the Theosophical Society: to form the nucleus of a universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, caste, color, or sex. Charles Johnston.
Thank you, Patrice. Beautifully read. And now we'll have the talk by Russ on Charles Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you. I think in the theosophical arena, Charles Johnston is probably best known for his extensive writing, especially his translations and his commentaries on the Upanishads and other ancient scriptures. He was a brilliant Sanskrit scholar, and he had studied the language as part of his curriculum at Dublin University in preparation for the Bengal Civil Service exam. And from time to time, he taught Sanskrit at several different universities, both in England and in the United States. He was born in Ireland in 1867. His connection with the Theosophical movement, it began at a remarkably early age, and his devotion to the theosophical cause lasted throughout his life. He was about 17 years old when his college friend, William Butler Yeats, gave him a copy of A.P. Sinnett's Esoteric Buddhism. And his plans of becoming a Christian missionary were soon displaced as he became captivated by the theosophical teachings. It really lit a fire in him. And in those early years, he studied deeply all the theosophical literature that was available, including HPB's Isis Unveiled and Light on the Path and the 5 Years of Theosophy. He was also a good friend of George Russell, and the three of them, along with other like-minded fellows, started what they called the Hermetic Society for the purpose of promoting Oriental religions and Theosophy generally. Now, Johnson went to London in 1887, and he interviewed Madame Blavatsky. That interview is you can read it in that biography of HPB that Helena referred to. And he later wrote of his first impressions of her. And I want to read from this because I think what he picks up on, it really says a lot about his own sensibilities when he was, all of 20 years old. He says this: "The first and earliest impression I received from Madame Blavatsky was the feeling of the power and largeness of her individuality, as though I were in the presence of one of the primal forces of nature. This sense of the power of individuality was not what one has felt in the presence of some great personality who dominates and dwarfs surrounding persons into insignificance and tyrannously overrides their independence. It was rather the sense of a profound, deep-seated reality, an exhaustless power of resistance, a spirit built on the very depths of nature and reaching down to the primeval eternities of truth. Gradually apparent under this dominant impression of power arose a subtle sense of great gentleness and kindliness, an unfailing readiness to forget herself entirely and to throw herself heartily into the life of others." That same year, in 1887, he and Claude Falls Wright, they formed the Dublin Theosophical Lodge, and as was pointed out, the Hermetic Society sort of transformed into that Dublin Lodge, and it became a very active center of theosophical study and intellectual activity. And they published a journal, the Irish Theosophist, which ran for 5 volumes. In 1888, he passed his exams, and in that year, he got married to Madame Blavatsky's niece. The two of them traveled to India, where he began what he intended to be a career in the civil service. But after 2 years, he had become so sick with malaria that he was forced to leave India. And he and his wife, Vera, spent the next several years living in various places in Europe, where he made a living as a writer and a journalist. He was a prolific writer. And throughout this time, including his time in India, he wrote a great many articles for theosophical journals, the Theosophists, The Path, Lucifer magazines. And William Q. Judge asked him to do translations primarily of the Upanishads for the Oriental Department Papers, which was a little publication that Judge had started. And this he did for a number of years and became its editor. Johnston and his wife Vera immigrated to the United States a few months after following Judge's death in 1896. He eventually associated himself with the society that was started by E.T. Hargrove in New York, and he remained with that group until his death in 1931. He wrote extensively for their publication, the Theosophical Quarterly, in which appeared a great many of his translations and commentaries. He also wrote a few books, including a novel and a couple of books about Ireland. And you can see on the screen a couple of other books that he wrote. And one writer once said of his translations of the Upanishads that while numerous English versions of the Upanishads are available, none that we know of compares either in depth or beauty of utterance with the work of Mr. Johnston. One of his early translations of the Katha Upanishad appeared in 1895, and it contains a dedication addressed to his friend George Russell. And in that dedication, he recalls the wondrous times that they spent together 10 years prior, when they first began to seek the small old path the seers know. And he states, it was an ambition of mine in those old days to translate from the Indian books of wisdom the story of the sacrificer's son who was sent by his father to the house of death. This story has always seemed to me a teaching of admirable worth, carrying with it the most precious gift of all, a sense of the high mysteriousness and vast treasure of life, which makes us seekers forever, always finding, yet always knowing that there is still more to find, so that every day becomes a thing of limitless promise and wonder. Thank you.
Russ. That concludes our program for today, and giving gratitude to the fraternity of elder brothers, as Mr. Judge says in the Ocean of Theosophy, that humanity has never been without a friend, but has a long line of elder teachers. They all know each other. They all work together, and they are working with us. They did not exist in the past, but they are working through the very forms that we are now occupying. And it also reminds us, as Russ pointed out, that each one of us must become a center in that work, and how we are not to wait. We might have very limiting conditions. There might feel like there's very little that we can do, to further this work. But all these wonderful people that we heard of tonight all began where we are now. They didn't land on the planet fully made. They became that through many lifetimes to get to the point where they could share Theosophy. And so every effort that we make in that direction to share Theosophy prepares us for the many incarnations of work that we have ahead of us in this long journey of Kali Yuga. So even if our work seems like a small portion at this point in time, seems like just a small light, a small candle, that work that we do is very important in the greater scheme of things. And so we are reminded by Mahatma K.H., if you should know us, study our philosophy. If you should serve us, serve our humanity. And so it's very simple, the work that we can do. And I'd like to thank all the speakers and the readers for tonight, this afternoon, and also to say thank you to the many students who left wonderful comments in the chat box for us to consider.